further diminishing his credibility, further diminishing his respect among our men and women of our services, and further diminishing his integrity. This Prime Minister is to blame for this, Mr. Speaker, not the Minister of Defence, for this situation to keep going on and on and on the way it is. Thank you.
Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today on the first day of National Nursing Week, and I'm sure I'm the first among many members in this place who will take an opportunity now to speak about the enormous contribution to Canadian society of the nursing profession. The theme for National Nursing Week this year is #Yes, This Is Nursing, and focuses on the evolving role that nurses play in Canadian society. Should also make mention of the fact that this overlaps as well with National Hospice Palliative Care Week. We're all well aware in this place of the need to expand care, palliative care, particularly in relation to our focus that this House passed last year on physician-assisted dying. I want to also note that nurses have a real challenge increasingly with inadequate protection. They need more staff with them. They need to be sure that they're secure and safe in their workplace. But for now, Mr. Speaker, I just want to close by thanking the nurses of Canada for everything they do to heal and take care of us.
The honourable member for Scarborough-Guildwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honoured to rise today to pay tribute to Don Cousin, the former mayor of the City of Markham, who recently passed away. He leaves behind a loving family, friends, a lifetime of notable accomplishments, and a community that is grateful for his many years of service. Don was a lifelong learner who never shied away from a new adventure. Over the course of his life, he was an ordained minister, a high-tech executive, a politician, an advocate, and even a commandant at Fort Henry Guard. For someone of Don's remarkable character and abilities, it was only a matter of time before he was drawn to public service. He spent nearly a decade as a school trustee and later elected in 4 successive terms as Mayor of Markham. He also served as an MPP in Ontario's legislature, first becoming Deputy Speaker and then Minister of Correctional Services. His list of accomplishments is long, but among them are efforts to bring in anti-smoking legislation in Ontario, building Highway 407, and establishing the Charter Community Foundation, a charitable organization. Don will always be remembered for his keen mind, his love of family, and his wonderful sense of humor. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Health and myself, the House join me in thanking Don for his lifetime of service.
The Honourable Member for Richmond, Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, over the last few weeks, I had the privilege of being the guest of honour to several cadet annual reviews in my riding, and I can tell you that our youth is extraordinary. Every year, the Canadian Cadets Program accompanies young people aged 12 to 18 years old in order to increase their confidence, their self-esteem, and their knowledge. Also, these young people give back to the community some of what they learned by acting as volunteers, and it's all of Canadian society that benefits from their involvement. Dear cadets, boys and girls in the Navy, Army, and Air Force from Windsor, Asbestos, Richmond, Warwick, Victoriaville, or even Daveleville, allow me to pay tribute to you today. Through the efforts that you dedicate, you are developing leadership abilities that will be useful to you throughout your entire lives. It is with the greatest respect for your work and your positive involvement that I want to congratulate you. I'm sure that each and every one of you has a bright future ahead. Bravo, and I wish you success.
Honourable member for St. Catharines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Running throughout the month of May each year, the Niagara Folk Arts Festival is the oldest continually running heritage festival in Canada. Cultural communities from across Niagara will showcase their rich and dynamic cultures. Events including the Ambassador's Ball, along with many open houses, will be held throughout the month, each displaying the unique culture of their host. It's amazing to see long-standing participants such as the Italian, Ukrainian, Polish, and German communities showcase years of tradition, which have been passed down to new generations. However, last year was truly a highlight for me, being present to witness the festival's first Syrian open house. To see refugees who were not long ago fleeing war, now standing up and showcasing their heritage to their new neighbours was truly an honour. Credit is due to Jeff Birch and his team, along with 28 cultural partners who spend countless hours each year planning the festival. Together, they provide residents with a window into the rich history and vibrant communities that helped build St. Catharines over the past 141 years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Desnethi, Mississippi, Churchill River.
Ovarian cancer is the most deadly women's cancer in Canada. Outcomes for ovarian cancer have not changed in 50 years. Treatments have not advanced significantly since the 1990s. Dollars being invested in ovarian cancer research isn't enough, causing slow scientific progress compared to other diseases. Immediate investment in ovarian research to help save lives is required, as well as support for ongoing research to screen for ovarian cancer and implementation of Bill S-201 to prevent and prohibit genetic discrimination to empower Canadian women to use genetic testing. It's about time we do more for the women living with this disease. Women living with all forms of cancers in my riding have to travel hundreds of kilometers and be separated from families to get treatment in Saskatoon. We must help Ovarian Cancer Canada and the women it helps by increasing awareness for their cause on May 8th for World Ovarian Cancer Day.
The honourable member for Bourassa.
Monsieur le Président, salam alaikum. Je suis heureux d'accueillir aujourd'hui au Parlement des membres de l'Association musulmane de Montréal-Nord qui se trouve dans le comté de Bourassa que je représente, Anna Mahatkom. Il s'agit d'une association fondée en 1988 par les membres de la communauté marocaine résidant à Montréal-Nord. L'association...
Apparently there's a problem with the interpretation. Pardon me. Is it now working? It is now working. The honourable member for Bourassa. You may restart. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, salam alaikum. I'm pleased to welcome today to Parliament members of the Muslim Association of Montreal North that are in the riding of Bourassa, which I represent. Anna Mahatkum. This is an association that was founded in 1988 by members of the Moroccan community living in Montreal North. The association has as its objectives to preserve Muslim identity, to offer educational and religious services, to facilitate the integration of newcomers into their host society. Mr. Speaker, the Montreal North Association has existed for 29 years and it contributes to living together in the riding of Bourassa. I would like to highlight the work of the president of this association, Mr. Abdelaziz Zik, and wish them the most cordial of welcomes to the House of Commons.
Honourable member for Battle River, Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Public Accounts Committee heard details on National Defence's shortage of approximately 4,000 troops. The recent heavy rainfall and flooding and the deployment of hundreds of Canadian Force personnel to assist communities highlights the importance of Canada having enough troops. Thank you. I'm very fortunate to have CFB Wainwright in my constituency. I've attended many of their graduations. There's much pride for everyone involved, particularly the new recruit and their families. The Bold Eagle program has great success providing First Nation recruits. Canadians should know that the Canadian Forces is not a secondary career choice. With pride, it can be a first choice. There are many positions waiting to be filled that include valuable training, experience, and professional qualifications for individuals. Members of Parliament visiting schools, talking about the importance of education and careers can play a role to bolster the number of men and women recruits. If just 335 members of Parliament help to encourage the recruitment of a dozen of their constituents, our CAF could reach their recruitment goals.
The honourable member for Central Nova.
I was 7 years old when the Westray mine exploded 25 years ago. I remember sitting in Mrs. Williams' class at Frank H. MacDonald Elementary School as we learned of the disaster that would break the back of my community. We all spent days watching the tragedy unfold and hoping and praying that the rescue workers would find the men alive underground. And our hope would soon fade as we learned that our community had lost 26 fathers, husbands, brothers, and sons. After years of advocacy of members of the families that were affected by this disaster, Parliament passed laws to promote safer workplace environments, and I commit, as long as I am fortunate enough to sit in this House, I will work to see those rules enforced. To the families of those 26 men who were lost to the explosion a quarter-century ago, we remember your loved ones on the somber anniversary this week. And as the monument at home in Pictou County reads, their light shall always shine.
Honourable Member for Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, today I offer a warm congratulations to Belleville's own Albert College, which has celebrated its 160th anniversary as a renowned international university prep school. As Canada's oldest co-educational boarding and day school, Albert College has provided an enriched and comprehensive education to many students throughout its history. Currently, its campus focuses on a close-knit connection between the over 300 students from pre-kindergarten to grade 12 and postgraduate levels, who are representatives of 20 countries. Albert College's commitment to fostering academic excellence has been recognized for developing driven and engaged global citizens who confidently tackle diverse challenges beyond their educational attainments. The college emphasizes on cultivating foundational values for character building and goal setting are qualities that last a lifetime. In attending this ceremony, I was privileged to meet many Albert College alumni who are eager to return to join in the celebration of this milestone anniversary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Mr. Speaker, today is World Ovarian Cancer Awareness Day. Representatives of Ovarian Cancer Canada recently were in Ottawa seeking $10 million to conduct life-saving research into this deadly disease. While survival rates for other forms of cancer continue to improve, survival rates for women with ovarian cancer have not improved for 50 years. Every day, 5 women lose their battle to ovarian cancer. This cancer is harder to detect and therefore it's harder to treat. And women often don't receive treatment until it's too late and the cancer has spread. We need to do more to stop this disease that is killing our mothers, our sisters, and our daughters. We can and we will do more.
The Honourable Member for Toronto-Danton.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to highlight World Ovarian Cancer Day. Ovarian cancer affects thousands of women in Canada. This year, 2,800 women are expected to be diagnosed with this illness. Ovarian cancer is the deadliest cancer affecting women.
In Ovarian Cancer Canada Walk of Hope in Toronto, and there will be similar walks across the country. Today, on the day of the walk, and every day, our focus should be on giving women hope. With additional research, we can develop treatments and continue the search for a cure. And with that comes hope. Joignez-vous à moi?
Join me in supporting Ovarian Cancer Canada, an organization that supports women affected by this illness as well as their families. It raises awareness and raises funds in order to support research. Above all, let us give hope to the women who are fighting ovarian cancer and to the survivors throughout our entire country. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Nickel Belt. Mr. Speaker.
Mining and exploration industry, which plays a vital role in creating good jobs and supporting middle-class families, urban, rural, and northern regions, as well as Indigenous communities. Mineral development is a transformative industry, advanced sustainable development, and cutting-edge technology. L'industrie minière au Canada.
The mining industry in Canada is a processing industry which favors sustainable development with the help of modern technology. To make sure that this industry continues to contribute to our economy, Budget 2017 extended the mining exploration tax credit for 1 more year.
Clean technology innovation to ensure we remain competitive and a global leader in Northern Ontario and across Canada. I ask all honourable members to join me in celebrating National Mining Week and recognizing the importance of Canada's mineral industry and its workers. Miigwech.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, Canadians in the eastern part of the country are going through a difficult time after the onslaught of Mother Nature, who has brought unusual levels of flooding to residential areas. People are facing an uncontrollable situation that is threatening everything they have. I would like to send them all the energy they need to overcome it all. I am happy once again to see all the support, empathy, generosity, and help brought by families, neighbors, and people from all walks of life who are demonstrating their willingness to support and help each other. This is impressive, and I invite the public to donate to the Red Cross Emergency Fund. Allow me to highlight the swift response of the men and women in uniform from the Valcarce military base who responded instantly as soon as the request was made by the authorities. They are working to protect property in affected areas. Once again, I want to give sincere thanks to the thousands of people who have contributed. The solidarity of our population makes me proud to be Canadian. Together, we will get through this hardship.
Honourable Member for King Vaughan.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to recognize the National Holocaust Remembrance Day ceremony being held today in Ottawa by the Canadian Society for Yad Vashem. Nous nous rappelons et respectons.
We remember and pay respect to the 6 million Jews killed in the Holocaust. The sheer magnitude of this number is hard to grasp.
Says here. Primo Levi, an Italian survivor of Auschwitz, warned about the painful inability of language to express the horrors done, with whole generations wiped out. Last month, while attending Yom HaShoah Remembrance Ceremony in Toronto, organized by the Adath Israel congregation, I heard emotional stories from the survivors. We must listen to the survivors. Their testimonies are a warning about what happens when divisiveness and hate are allowed to flourish. To them I say, Li'olam lo'od, never again, not in Canada, not anywhere. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Windsor West.
I rise today to thank U.S. legislators who recently saved the Great Lakes from catastrophic budget cuts proposed by the Trump administration. This bipartisan effort restored over $300 million in critical funding for the Great Lakes. Unfortunately, the Liberal government is falling short of matching U.S. investments and continues to consider storing radioactive nuclear waste on the shores of the Great Lakes. U.S. legislators like Senators Debbie Stabenow, Gary Peters, and Sherrod Brown, or Congressman Dan Kildee or John Mitchell are some of the opposition leaders in the U.S. who vehemently expressed opposition to the plan. Not only is it environmentally reckless, but it is an increasingly significant diplomatic irritant, with Canada developing a reputation as a, quote, free rider on the U.S. Great Lakes protection initiatives and investments. Storing nuclear waste next to the Great Lakes should be scrapped. Millions of peoples, more than 200 municipalities, states, businesses, environmental organizations have all lined up in opposition. All we need now is this Liberal Prime Minister, his cabinet, and the Liberals to do the same.
Honourable Member for Calgary Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to express my deepest gratitude to the people of Calgary Heritage for giving me the privilege to serve as a Member of Parliament. It is truly an honour to be elected MP in this riding. I will strive to carry on the legacy of Stephen Harper and continue the riding's tradition of strong representation. Thank you to my campaign team and the hundreds of volunteers who have supported me. Without you, I wouldn't be here. To my wife Sue and our children, thank you for your ongoing support and encouragement. As the MP of Calgary Heritage, I will work hard to be a strong voice in my riding. My constituents have expressed many concerns to me, and they have sent me here to deliver a message to the Liberal government. Improve our economy, balance our budget, pay down our debt, build pipelines, secure our borders, and protect our fundamental right to free expression. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Chippewa-Lacal.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of all my colleagues, we offer our thoughts and prayers to everyone affected by the catastrophic flooding in Quebec, in Ontario, in British Columbia, and in New Brunswick. We are going through a difficult time. We ask everyone to be careful as volunteers support the efforts of first responders. As demonstrated by images and shared stories, communities are coming together, whether it be to fill sandbags, to serve meals, or to offer a place to stay. The Government of Canada supports the work of officers working on the ground, and we thank those who have already given their time, energy, and support. Mr. Speaker, along with my colleagues, I invite all Canadians to offer their help and to recognize the painful situation many are facing. We are stronger when we stand together to face a challenge. Thank you.
Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, intense flooding is currently affecting thousands of Canadians across the country. It's forcing people from their homes in British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick.
We hope that all Canadians confronted with these terrible circumstances will be safe and will cooperate with first responders and emergency services and will offer assistance to their neighbours insofar as possible.
And Canadians on the assistance the government is providing to all Canadians that are caught up in this flooding.
Honourable Prime Minister.
I thank the honourable member for her question. I can confirm that, of course, our thoughts are with all Canadians affected by the flooding, and we thank the first responders as well as the volunteers who have been involved for many days now to help their communities and neighbours.
Has spoken to his counterparts in Quebec and Ontario, and officials continue to speak with authorities in New Brunswick and British Columbia and indeed across the country. I can confirm that approximately 1,650 Canadian Forces members were deployed, and Ontario has also requested help with 250,000 sandbags, which are on their way.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of National Defence never explained to Canadians why he exaggerated his role in Operation Medusa more than once. We've asked him on many occasions to explain himself in the House, and the media have also asked for explanations. Instead of responding, the Prime Minister sent the Minister of Transport to be interviewed in his place. If the Prime Minister has no trust or confidence in his Minister of National Defence, why should Canadians have such confidence? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, once again, I have full confidence in our Minister of National Defence. He does an exceptional job. He's always served his country, be it as a police officer, as a soldier, or as a Member of Parliament and Minister of National Defence. I'm very proud of the work he's doing right now. To point out that for 10 years, the Conservative government underinvested in our Canadian Armed Forces. These are investments that mean that, unfortunately, our armed forces did not have the equipment and support necessary to do their jobs. That's something that we will solve. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Minister of Defence has let down countless Canadian Armed Forces members by exaggerating his role in Afghanistan, and he did it at least twice. When he was on active duty, I don't believe the minister would have ever resorted to such an exaggeration. It was only when he became a Liberal politician that he decided he needed to embellish this record. Mr. Speaker, when he was in the military, I assumed that he would have never stood for this kind of behaviour. So why does he expect Canadians to accept it now, and why does the Prime Minister accept it?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of National Defence has an exceptional record of service to his country, whether it's as a police officer, as a decorated Army veteran, or indeed now as Minister of National Defence and MP. He continues to work very hard day in and day out to give to our troops the tools and the capacity they need to succeed. We continue to ensure that we are looking at what our military needs after 10 years of underinvestments by the previous government. We're about to give the valorous women and men who serve the tools and the support they need. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's Infrastructure Bank will take $35 billion from taxpayers to backstop profits for well-connected investment bankers and pension fund managers and their clients. The problem is that these same wealthy and well-connected one-percenters are the ones actually helping set up the bank. BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, aren't just in the room giving advice to the Prime Minister. They're in the room to actually represent their clients. Why can't the Prime Minister see this as a conflict that it is?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we all know that there is a significant level of underinvestment that has happened over years and indeed decades in Canada in our infrastructure. And we got elected on a commitment to invest in Canada's communities, invest in our infrastructure, which is why we put forward a plan for $180 billion of investments in infrastructure that are going to make a difference in Canadians' lives. But we also know there are greater needs even than that, and drawing in on different sources of capital so people can get to work and home on time. People can get their goods to markets, create good middle-class jobs is a priority for us.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition, order.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the fund managers are licking their lips. This is a blatant conflict. The Prime Minister has turned to BlackRock for all kinds of advice setting up this bank. That's like the three little pigs hiring the big bad wolf to be their contractor. Mr. Speaker, everyone can see the conflict of interest here. It's obvious. And thanks to the Prime Minister, the rich just keep getting richer. So, Mr. Speaker, who's going to stick up for the taxpayer?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the approach that we have put forward over the past year and a half on infrastructure is in direct contrast to the approach of the previous government. We believe in collaboration. We believe in working with people. That's why we've been consulting with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, with unions and work groups, with private investors, but also with chambers of commerce to talk about the kinds of investments in infrastructure that are going to lead to good jobs for Canadians now and growth that's going to help Canadian workers, Canadian families, and Canadians as we move forward in the coming years and even decades, Mr. Speaker.
Député d'Outremont.
Honourable Member for Outremont.
The Prime Minister appointed the Defence Minister. The Prime Minister told him to block an inquiry into the detainees scandal. The Prime Minister is responsible. Back when the Conservatives were in power, Liberal after Liberal called for an inquiry, but as soon as they formed government, all that ended. Why does this Prime Minister only support a request for an inquiry into the Afghan detainee scandal when the Conservatives of Stephen Harper were in power?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the issue of treatment of prisoners is one that all members of this House take extremely seriously, and that's why we are pleased that over the years there have been 6 different inquiries of different sorts into the Afghan detainee issue, including one ongoing right now. Indeed, there was one inquiry that required one of our former colleagues, Stéphane Dion, to spend an entire summer poring through 40,000 different documents to analyze what has happened. That was an opportunity also given to the NDP. They chose not to participate. Apparently it wasn't a priority for them. It is a priority for us and will continue to be.
Honourable Member for Outremont. In fact, Mr. Speaker, at the end of this truncated analysis, Stéphane Dion told the Conservatives, and I quote, "When you read these documents, you're going to have questions to put to your Prime Minister." That required an investigation. So not only do we now have a Minister of National Defence who misled us, but we also have a Prime Minister who follows his example. If the Prime Minister sincerely believes in transparency, and if he really wants to clarify the situation, why does he continue to block a public inquiry on the transfer of Afghan detainees? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. As I said, Mr. Speaker, there were 6 different investigations of various types on this issue, including one that's ongoing. We will continue to work to show that Canada takes the treatment of detainees very seriously. We will continue to work with all those involved to make sure that Canada assumes all its responsibilities, being aware of what happened, and make sure that nothing like this ever happens again in the future. The Honourable Member for Outremont.
There never has been a public inquiry into the transfer of Afghan detainees.
Mr. Speaker, thousands of people are watching helpless as their homes are being destroyed. These floods bring with them the safety of many homes and ruin memories and lives. What concrete commitment will the government make towards those who are victims of all this damage? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, first of all, I can tell you that it was an honour for me yesterday when I went to Terrasse Vaudreuil to see how people are coming together. Neighbours, strangers came and filled sandbags to help others, to protect homes that were in danger from being completely destroyed. This is something we fully support. We've sent 1,650 troops to date to help out. We're sending sandbags, but we'll also be there for the cleanup and further help when the time comes. The Honourable Member for Outremont. Concrete commitment, not much.
They're suffering through floods from Kelowna, British Columbia, to Île-Mercier in Quebec, to St. John, New Brunswick. Some of the regions affected have never seen floods like this before, and many are worried about what will happen next. Will the federal government commit here and now to fully support these communities in the aftermath of these terrible floods?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the federal government is there now to support the emergency situation that so many communities are facing with neighbours, volunteers, first responders, and now Canadian forces there to pitch in to try and protect homes, cherished memories, lives. This is something we take very seriously, and yes, the federal government will be there in the coming weeks and months to work with communities facing cleanup, facing rebuilds. This is what Canadians do. We're there for each other in times of trouble.
Député de Lac-Saint-Jean.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, well, here we are, Mr. Speaker. After having said so for months, here we are now. One company among many Canadian softwood lumber companies has announced that 1,300 workers on the North Shore of Quebec, especially in my region, will see their jobs affected by the U.S. decision that imposed this tax that we are all aware of. Mayors from Quebec, after the provincial governments, it's up to the federal government to negotiate these agreements. The provinces have such trust that they have appointed representatives. Now it's mayors. They're not there to do that, but they're going to Washington to push forward their case. When will the Prime Minister do this? Mr. Speaker.
Excusez-moi.
Sorry. Mr. Speaker. We want to protect the forestry system in Quebec, and we will energetically protect the softwood lumber sector. As I told the minister in Quebec, Richard Garneau, the forestry industry has never been deemed guilty. And as I continue to say, we want a good agreement for Canada, not any kind of agreement. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, I think what we've just seen
important for this government. That was meant not in the mandate letter, and she's looking for the answer, Mike. That's not a priority for their government. That's not a priority for them. Close to 400,000 people live from the forest industry. They don't have an answer to give to them. Négocier un accord au plus vite.
Negotiating an agreement fast. That's what the public wants. The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Speaker, when we talk about the softwood lumber agreement, the important thing is not speed, it's getting a good agreement for Canada and for Quebec. As I keep saying, and as Quebecers and Canadians know full well, we are right in this dispute. I am convinced that our forestry industry is perfectly right, and we're prepared to defend it and work for it and fight for our industry.
Mr. Speaker, what do RBC, BMO, Goldman Sachs, and the Blackstone Group have in common with 35 executives from TD Bank, other than making massive profits last year? They've all received free Broadway tickets courtesy of the Canadian taxpayer. Would the Liberals like to explain how buying Broadway tickets for banking executives does anything to help the middle class and those working hard to join it?
Here. Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker,
Order. I'm having difficulty. The Honourable Member for Huron-Bruce will come to order. Order. Need to hear the answer. The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, Come From Away celebrates the warmth, generosity, and cultural accomplishments of Canadians. were purchased at a significant discount, and our guests included the brave, inspiring volunteers from Newfoundland. We were proud as Canadians to showcase our national values and our cultural accomplishments at this key moment.
Honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Yes, that's why they invited a whole 2 people from Newfoundland to go too. And Mr. Speaker, middle-class Canadians are having trouble making ends meet and trouble making sense of these Liberals' priorities.
Hear, hear.
Heading to New York to see a Broadway play is not affordable for many Canadians, but the Prime Minister has no problem using taxpayers' dollars to buy tickets for lawyers and diplomats. So can the Prime Minister explain how spending tax dollars on Broadway tickets for diplomats from Kiribati or Tuvalu benefit middle-class families?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I am so proud of the response of the people of Newfoundland to the tragedy of 9/11. It was a heartwarming demonstration of Canadian values, and I am equally proud of the great work of Canadian artists in showcasing those Canadian values. I was very proud to be there, seeing our values, our warmth on stage, and you should have been proud that Canada was showcased that way too.
I might have been very proud, but the honourable minister should remember to direct her comments to the chair. The honourable member for South Surrey White Rock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's a blatant conflict of interest with the Liberals' infrastructure bank. The Liberals gave private investors control over the development of the bank, costing taxpayers $35 billion. This bank will now give a significant benefit to the exact same investors. P3 Canada already leverages private sector infrastructure dollars. The Liberal bank will not be transparent. It will not be accountable. Why are the Liberals designing a bank that gives 100% of the rewards to their friends and leaves 100% of the risk to taxpayers?
Honourable Minister of Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, we are proud of the historic investments we are making in infrastructure to grow our economy, create jobs for the middle class and opportunities for those Canadians who work hard each and every day to be part of the middle class. The honourable member is absolutely incorrect. The infrastructure bank will be accountable to Parliament. It will be accountable to Canadians through the Parliament. The infrastructure that we help support is municipal infrastructure and provincial infrastructure. And we consulted with those entities, FCM, provinces, territories, unions, labour organizations.
The honourable member for Richmond-Athabasca. Order, please. Mr. Speaker, what we've just found out is alarming. Upon request by the Prime Minister himself, federal public servants worked in close cooperation with BlackRock investment firm in order to ensure that the Liberal Infrastructure Bank is attractive to the billionaires of Abu Dhabi, China, and Saudi Arabia. This is flagrant conflict of interest, Mr. Speaker. Why are the Liberals helping foreign interests and their billionaire friends rather than help Canadians?
Mr. Speaker, unlike the previous government, our goal is to support our municipal and provincial entities to support the infrastructure that they need. We have put forward an ambitious plan, more than $180 billion that we will invest, and we also feel that we can do more for our municipal and provincial sector by engaging the private sector. The honourable member may have something against private investments. We don't. We feel that we can mobilize private capital to build more infrastructure that our Canadian communities need.
Honourable member for North Island, Powell River.
After all their campaign promises, documents reveal that Liberals spent months with corporations designing the so-called infrastructure bank. The priority of these corporations isn't providing infrastructure, it's profiting off of infrastructure. Shocker. The Liberals secretly co-wrote the rules of this privatization bank with the multinationals. This is a clear conflict of interest. Will the Liberal government deny that tolls and service fees will be placed on Canadians so that corporations can get their cut?
Hear, hear.
Honourable Minister of Infrastructure and Communities.
Well, Mr. Speaker, our government understands that investing in infrastructure help grow the economy, create long-term growth, jobs for the Canadians from coast to coast to coast. That is why we have put forward a very ambitious agenda, including the mobilization of private capital to build more infrastructure. We understand that Canadian communities need infrastructure. They have been lacking that infrastructure. They have seen a decade of underinvestment from the previous government. We have a lot of catching up to do. That's exactly what we're doing, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Belleuil-Saint-Bly.
Talking points, but it hasn't made them any better, that's for sure.
Mr. Speaker, if anyone still had doubts that this privatization banks was there to serve the Friends of the Liberals, you just have to look at the location that was announced this morning, where they're going to be on Bay Street. Studies and experts continue to question the government's approach, the lack of transparency. The bank doesn't even exist yet, and conflicts of interest continue to accumulate. Can the Prime Minister tell us why he announced the location of the bank when the bill to create it hasn't even been considered in committee? The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we see that every Canadian municipality has a potential to benefit from the bank, regardless where the bank is located. Because we will support projects that are priorities of the local community, whether it's Calgary, Edmonton, Ottawa, Montreal, whichever city that needs to build the infrastructure that requires. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, by engaging private capital, we will free up federal government resources to build more affordable housing, to build more childcare facilities, to build more recreational facilities, as well as support our rural and northern communities with $2 billion fund that has...
Honourable Member for Selkirk, Interlake Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, even the Prime Minister doesn't trust the Defence Minister to speak honestly anymore and ruled out other Liberal MPs to talk to the media instead. According to the National Defence Code of Ethics, being a person of integrity calls for honesty and the avoidance of deception. It requires the pursuit of truth regardless of personal consequences. Even the Prime Minister's own code states ministers must act with honesty. Based on these standards, can the Defence Minister honestly explain if he has any integrity left?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence. The main responsibility of the Minister of National Defence and that of our government is to protect the interests of our troops and make sure they have the support, training, and equipment they need to be successful in their various missions. For a year and a half, that's exactly the objective of the minister, and this is what he endeavours to do every day. One of the key elements of his mandate is to give our country a new defence policy. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of National Defence violated Article 5.3 of the Armed Forces Code of Ethics. With regard to integrity, it says, a person of integrity calls for honesty, the avoidance of deception, and adherence to high ethical standards. Speaking and acting with honesty and candor, in pursuit of truth regardless of personal consequences, especially manifested in leaders. What can the minister answer to that? Will he resign? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. The minister admitted last week that he'd made a mistake in describing his role. He retracted that in the House earlier this week and apologized. The comments by the minister were not intended to diminish the role of his companions in arms or his former superiors, and he apologized very sincerely. He's proud to have served with an extraordinary team made up of Canadian, American, and Afghan soldiers who made Operations Medusa a success. The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. I'd like to have the minister answer my question. The ministerial responsibility has always been part and parcel of our system. The minister must respect the system in place that calls for someone to resign in these circumstances. The government continues to say this same thing. This is not within our conventions here in this House. Why is the minister hanging on to his job where all Canadians agree that he should resign immediately? The Parliamentary Secretary. The government is proud of the service rendered by the Minister of National Defence as a police officer in the anti-gang unit in Vancouver, as a reservist in Afghanistan and in Bosnia, and especially as Minister of National Defence, who innovated with a new defence policy, the first one that had as much consultation involved in 20 years, in order to assure Canadian sovereignty and peace throughout the world.
Over the weekend, Canadians saw the Transport Minister giving political cover for the Minister of Defence in an interview about defence policy and spending. And that's exactly the problem, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister may say that he has complete confidence in the Minister, but the Minister has lost the trust of our troops, and shielding him will not make this go away. It won't go away because every time the Minister steps on a base and faces our CAF members, every time he's on a ship, and every time he addresses them, this will follow him. Will the Minister stand up in this House, do the right thing, and resign?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. The Minister of Defence is a former reservist. He will always hold the service of Armed Forces members in high esteem, including those who fought by his side during missions and those who served under other commanders at other times. The Minister will ensure that the members of the Armed Forces have all of the equipment, training, and care that they need to carry out their missions abroad and in Canada.
Honourable Member for Victoria.
The Liberals want to severely restrict the ability of the Parliamentary Budget Officer to initiate studies by requiring them to get a work plan approved by the Speakers of this House and of the Senate. They also want to prevent members of this place from requesting cost estimates of government projects. That means previous reports on old age security, on F-35 fighter jets, and crime legislation would simply not have been possible. Mr. Speaker, is this what an independent parliamentary budget officer looks like to this government?
Here, here. Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to providing greater independence to the parliamentary budget officer, and this is the overriding intent of the legislation recently introduced. As we have clearly said, that we are open to amendments, and we look forward to the bill being sent to committee for a detailed study where we can discuss the good ideas and that could have been put forward about changes to the parliamentary budget officer. So I say, let's advance this bill. Let's pass second reading so that the committee can do the important work to advance the government's intent of an independent parliamentary budget officer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to tell you a story. Once upon a time, there lived a man who was very smart and very curious, and also very good at math. He listened to the prince to make sure the prince wasn't talking nonsense, and to make sure he knew how to count. This bugged the young prince, who didn't want to be bothered by any of this. So the prince restricted the curious man's ability to dig around for information. Today, the Prime Minister is attacking the parliamentary budget officer. So what is the Liberal government trying to hide from taxpayers? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, our government is determined to make the Parliamentary Budget Officer more independent, and that is the main intent of the bill that was recently tabled before the House of Commons. We have said clearly that we are open to amendments, and we are eager that this bill move forward to study in committee so that it can be studied in depth, and so that we can have a discussion about good ideas for changing the Parliamentary Budget Office. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Laval-les-Îles. Mr. Speaker, the flooding has gotten worse this weekend in several regions, not only in Quebec, but also in Ontario, British Columbia, and New Brunswick. As my colleague mentioned, first responders will continue to play a critical role in protecting the safety of those affected. We've seen considerable damage, and we've also seen acts of great solidarity among neighbours who are helping each other in this difficult time. Can the Minister of Public Safety tell us what the government is doing to support the affected communities?
Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, our thoughts are with all those affected by these tragic events, including those whose family members have disappeared.
Friday, 1,650 Canadian Armed Forces personnel have been deployed. Yesterday, Ontario asked for help as well, and we are getting them an extra 250,000 sandbags as requested. We're also in touch with British Columbia and New Brunswick. We will keep working with all provincial partners to provide all the help we possibly can.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Omnibus Bill C-44, tabled by the Finance Minister, has a virus in it. And that virus directly attacks the Parliamentary Budget Officer, which doesn't make any sense. The PBO is independent and needs to remain so. But under this bill, the Speaker of the Senate, who is not elected but who is appointed by the Prime Minister, will have a veto power over the Parliamentary Budget Officer's game plan for the year. How can such an honourable minister explain such an unacceptable situation? The Honourable Government House Leader. As I said before, our government is determined to make the Parliamentary Budget Officer more independent. We have also said very clearly that we were open to amendments, and we are eager for the bill to move to committee study stage so that it can be studied in detail and so that we can have a discussion about good ideas concerning changes to the Parliamentary Budget Office. Let's make sure that this bill moves through second reading today so that we can start this important work in committee to improve the bill. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Well, it's really unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, that such an honourable and distinguished man like the Minister of Finance would end up doing the dirty work of the Liberal government. Now, the Government House Leader has said that they would be open to good ideas. Well, I have a good idea. Why doesn't the government separate all of the sections of this bill that concern the Parliamentary Budget Officer? Because the minister, and many ministers probably know this, it makes no sense to attack the Parliamentary Budget Office. It makes no sense, and you know it. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Time and time again, this government, we are committed to an independent Parliamentary Budget Officer that reports to Parliament. And that was the intent behind the legislation that was recently introduced. We are encouraging all members, let's work together. Let's pass second reading of this legislation. Let's send it to committee so that the study can take place, so that we can improve the legislation to ensure that the intentions of the government, which is an independent Parliamentary Budget Officer, are fulfilled. Let's work together to make that happen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Carleton. Order.
The Parliamentary Budget Officer's job is to blow the whistle when the government cooks the books and calculate what spending schemes will actually cost taxpayers. Yet the budget bill will give the Prime Minister's hand-picked Senate Speaker a veto over the work of the budget watchdog. With billions in new spending schemes and 3 decades worth of promise-breaking deficits ahead, why is the government trying to lock up the budget watchdog?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we said during the campaign, we continue to say we would like to advance the independence of the Parliamentary Budget Officer. We actually thank the Parliamentary Budget Officer for his analysis of the provisions of Bill C-44. We look forward to working with him and others to improve the bill to ensure we accomplish the objective of an effective and independent Parliamentary Budget Officer. What I have said to the member and to all members, let's pass this legislation at second reading. Let's send it to committee so that we can advance the independence of the Parliamentary Budget Officer. We can do this together, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Carleton.
The Syrian refugee plan was supposed to cost $250 million. Instead, it cost $1 billion. They said their deficit would only be $10 billion. It's more than double that. They said the budget will be balanced by 2019. Now it's 2055. To a government that cannot count, there is nothing more terrifying than a man armed with a calculator. Why are the Liberals silencing the one person that can give them desperately needed help with remedial math?
Honourable Government House Leader.
We support the independence of the Parliamentary Budget Officer. Where the previous government Budget had the Parliamentary Budget Officer responding and reporting to the Library of Parliament. We are saying that the Parliamentary Budget Officer should respond to Parliament, to members of Parliament, and that's why we are saying let's work together to improve the legislation. Let's let it pass second reading. Let's send it to committee so the committee can do its important work. We are open to amendments. I will continue to repeat that until members provide some constructive feedback to improve the legislation for the independence of the Parliamentary Budget Officer.
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Mr. Speaker, citizens dealing with the recent flooding were happy to see the army arrive. But citizens of Yamashish, where there have been huge waves due to the passage of ships, apparently, are still wondering why the Minister of Transport is dragging his feet on calling an inquiry. 2-meter-high waves that damage residences have nothing to do with an act of God, Mr. Speaker. Someone needs to be responsible for this. So will the minister quickly call an inquiry and inform the victims of their options? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, our government recognizes the importance of navigation and ensuring that it is safe and respectful of the environment. We are aware of the situation of the residents of Yamashish, and we have received complaints about this incident. We are currently evaluating the situation, and the inquiry is still underway. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, the Phoenix fiasco continues. People are at their wits' end. They're coming to my office desperately asking me to intervene. For example, there was the mother who had to wait 7 months to get her maternity benefits, or the group of retirees who have been waiting for months for large sums of money. This is unacceptable. What will it take for the government to take action and find a solution for these people who are suffering financial problems and stress through no fault of their own? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, of course, as the member for Gatineau and as the Parliamentary Secretary, I take this issue very seriously, as does the government. We are taking steps, additional steps, and investing additional money to help the people who are affected by this. It's unacceptable to see that families are affected by this situation. But what we will not do, Mr. Speaker, is we won't make fake savings of $70 million like the Conservatives did, because we need people. We don't want to make cuts. We need people to solve this problem.
Nose Hill.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there are motions in front of the Immigration Committee to study the illegal border crossing crisis. This urgent situation is draining resources of the RCMP, the CBSA, provincial housing, legal aid, and healthcare services. So Canadians are confused as to why the Liberals shut down debate not once but twice on this matter. So can the chair of the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration please update Canadians as to when this urgent matter will be debated at committee, or are the Liberals just going to keep shutting it down over and over again?
Honourable Chair.
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member knows well, it's the committee itself which decides what studies to study and which studies they will study in the future. Presently, we're studying immigration consultants, an issue of tremendous importance, and then the House mandated us to do an Atlantic immigration study, which we will be doing throughout the rest of this session and into the fall. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose
I feel
Hill.
that many Canadians won't be satisfied with that answer. But, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister could be doing many things to address this issue, including closing the loophole in the Safe Third Country Agreement. Instead, the Liberals have announced a whole, wait for it, $30,000 for first responders in Manitoba. For those counting, that's a whopping $609 more than they just spent on Broadway tickets for wealthy investment bankers, Mr. Speaker. So my question simply is this. Can the Prime Minister stand up and tell Canadians why his priority is Broadway and not the border?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, our priority is applying Canadian law and keeping Canadians safe. In fact, crossing the border in an irregular fashion is no free ticket to Canada. Those people are apprehended. They are identified biographically and biometrically. Their information is checked against all data systems in Canada as well as internationally. If there's a danger, they are detained. They go before the IRB to hear their claims, and if their claims cannot be justified, then deportation proceedings are commenced. The law is applied as are Canadian treaties.
Honourable Member for Provencher.
Mr. Speaker, as the Liberals dither, the Prime Minister has even gone so far as to dismiss the safety concerns of our border communities, calling those asking for his help fearful and closed in. This is precisely the arrogant attitude that is frustrating so many Canadians, and it's why the Prime Minister needs to actually talk to those on the front lines of this crisis. Will the Prime Minister commit right now to visiting Emerson to speak directly with the families impacted by his inaction?
Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, some weeks ago it was my privilege to visit Emerson. I had the opportunity to meet with the Reeve and the Council. I had the opportunity to meet with many of the citizens there. I noticed that members of the opposition paid a visit last week. It's interesting that a good many of the citizens of that community challenged the opposition for the kind of attitude that they were displaying on this issue. It is important to respect Canadian law. It is being enforced in every way, Mr. Speaker. It's also important to honour Canada's international obligations in the proper treatment of asylum seekers. We are applying both in a measured way.
The Honourable Member for Mississauga East Cooksville.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians need immediate investments in their community's public transit system so that they can get to work on time and get home at the end of a long day. Mr. Speaker, in Mississauga, many residents lose hours every day due to congestion because their transit system is in need of improvements. Can the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities update this House in the investments this government is making in Mississauga transit?
Good question. Well, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the honourable member for Mississauga East Cooksville for his hard work. And on May 5th, our government announced more than $58 million for 57 public transit projects alongside with the Government of Ontario and City of Mississauga. These investments will allow the city to buy new buses, install 100 additional bus shelters to improve transit service in the city. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Foothills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last weekend at the Alberta Beer Fest, literally hundreds of craft brewers, distillers, and Canadians were asking me why beer, wine, and spirits are not part of the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. They are asking why, rather than supporting a policy that will ensure Canadian entrepreneurs can be successful, the Liberals saddled them with a tax hike that will increase each and every year. The Liberals have a chance to do the right thing. They have a second chance to stand up for the Canadian economy. Will the Liberals act as an intervener in the Supreme Court case in the Canadian free trade? Will they help free the beer? Hear, hear.
Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, we pursued a very clear path working with the provinces and territories and helping liberalize alcohol. As you know, Mr. Speaker, I don't consume alcohol, but this is a priority for myself and our government, and this is why we worked very closely with the provinces and territories to make sure it was part of the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. This historic agreement is going to, again, create an environment that's going to help businesses and consumers. It's going to provide more choice and better price points for consumers. And with regards to alcohol, Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue to work with the provinces in a manner that's going to be productive, thoughtful, and progressive, and get good results for Canadian consumers.
Honourable Member for Windsor-Tecumseh.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals clearly broke their election promise to restore home mail delivery across Canada. But at the very least, in communities like mine in Windsor and Tecumseh, they committed to bring back door-to-door and remove the poorly and hastily installed mega boxes. Thousands of households in my community alone are still waiting. Seniors are counting on this government to fulfill this important promise. It's been over a year and a half, so what's the holdup?
Parliamentary Secretary for Public Services and Procurement.
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course our government delivered on its promise to suspend the conversion to community mailboxes and undertake a full and thorough review of Canada Post. We thank the task force that worked so diligently on this issue. We thank as well the parliamentary committee, the response to which we have just recently filed, and the government continues to deliberate on this matter and will be furnishing a full response later this spring. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Toronto Danforth.
Mr. Speaker, our government's strong support for the arts is very important to my constituents and to all Canadians. What steps is the government putting in place in order to provide Canada's cultural innovators with opportunities to work and collaborate with one another in order to further their art and create economic opportunities together?
The Honourable Member, Honourable Parliament Secretary.
I want to thank the member from Toronto Danforth for her question and for her continued advocacy and support on behalf of the arts in her riding and around the country. Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to the arts. We're committed to supporting creative labs and to bringing artists and creators together to work and grow. That's why we've invested $5.25 million in the Artscape Daniels Launchpad to give creators and entrepreneurs access to spaces, tools, and technology, plus the skills and opportunities needed to innovate and thrive in today's creative economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Last week, Ambassador McCallum said in reference to an extradition treaty with China, quote, "We've agreed to talk about the issues that need to be addressed for China or any other country to meet our high standards." But on Friday, the parliamentary secretary said, and I quote, "There are no extradition negotiations." Now, if talking to the Chinese government about the extradition treaty is not negotiating that very same treaty, then would the Liberals give an honest answer and explain what these non-negotiation talks are about on extradition with the Chinese government?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, the protection of human rights is an integral part of our government's foreign policy. Canada and China are not extradition partners, and there are no extradition treaty negotiations. As with all cases internationally, our government's commitment is to the protection of human rights, the rule of law, and due process.
The Honourable Member for Pierre Boucher, Les Patriotes Verchères. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Bloc Québécois, I would like to address all of the people affected by the flooding and to say that we're standing with you. Thank you to the volunteers, workers, and soldiers who are doing extraordinary work there. Mr. Speaker, the mayors of Quebec know that they can't count on the Liberal government to defend the softwood lumber industry in Quebec. That's why they organized a UMQ mission in Washington themselves. Ottawa is invisible there. If Quebec were independent, things would be different. What is the Prime Minister waiting for to provide loan guarantees? The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Speaker, it was the Conservative government that let this agreement expire. The countervailing duties imposed are punitive and unfair, and we will be defending our international rights, and we will win, as we always have in the past. I repeat, we want a good agreement for Canada, not any old agreement. The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, with 1,300 workers from the North Shore, Mauricie, and Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean who have just lost their jobs, we can see that the softwood lumber crisis is causing real pain for workers in Quebec. So I want to address my Liberal colleagues from Quebec, including the member for Avignon, Lametis-Matane, Matapédia. They voted in favor of a loan guarantee of $2.9 billion for Muskrat Falls, which provides unfair competition in Quebec. Today, our softwood lumber industry is threatened. Will you stand to defend it by calling for the solution that all of Quebec wants, except you perhaps, loan guarantees? I would remind the Honourable Member to direct her comments through the Speaker. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Canada has been working for months, not only across our government, but with our provincial counterparts from virtually every region in the country, knowing that there would be a countervail imposed against the forestry sector by the United States that are punitive and unacceptable. We are looking at strategies both in the short term that will look at workers who may lose their jobs. We're looking at producers who will be very concerned about their capacity to continue their operations, and in the longer term, to make sure that expansion of markets and transition in the industry will mean that there will be a long-term future for the forestry sector, so important to all of Canada.
The Honourable Member for Joliette. Mr. Speaker, the Infrastructure Bank announced this morning is a great deal for the finance world. Our infrastructure will be privatized and will be made more expensive for taxpayers. Our roads, aqueducts, and sewers. Worse, it's bankers in Toronto who will be profiting from this. Some people thought the bank might be headquartered in Montreal, but no, of course it'll be in Bay Street. Why does the government want these infrastructures in Quebec to simply enrich bankers in Toronto?
Minister of Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier, regardless of the location of the bank, every community has the potential to benefit from the Canada Infrastructure Bank. We put forward a $180 billion infrastructure plan to support communities of all sizes, from coast to coast to coast. And only less than 10% of that will be delivered through the infrastructure bank. Rest of the money will flow through provinces and territories and municipalities through our other agreements. We believe that infrastructure is a strong foundation for growing our economy and creating jobs for the middle class. Thank you, Mr.
Dépôt de documents.
Tabling of documents.
Alors, order. I encourage honourable members to take their conversations outside into the lobbies, and members might assist me by joining me in saying shh. Tabling of documents, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 32.2, I have the honour to table in the House, in both official languages, a document entitled Proposals to Correct Certain Anomalies, Inconsistencies and Errors, and to deal with other matters of a non-controversial and uncomplicated nature in the statutes of Canada, and to repeal certain acts and provisions that have expired, lapsed, or otherwise ceased to have effect. I understand that this document is deemed referred to the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights for study.
Dépôt de projet de loi.
Introduction of government bills. Statements by ministers. Reports from interparliamentary delegations.
Please, the Honourable Member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker.